Money is still the number one cause of stress and anxiety in working adults in the UK. The vast majority of people in the UK, they're not taught this stuff, right? They're going to TikTok and YouTube and Reddit for financial education. Clickable, snackable, clickbait content is just allowed to run riot on social media. And what really got my backup was
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of But Is It Legal with me, Simon Marshall of TBD Marketing, legal marketing agency. I'm sure you've heard of us. We tend to hang around on LinkedIn quite a bit. With me today, I've got the brilliant Carla Hoppe, who is coming on to talk about all things kind of wealth and well-being and things like that. So, Carla, can you, for those few people who don't know you on LinkedIn, can you do a quick introduction? Tell them who you are and what you do for a living. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Simon. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Carla. I'm the founder of Wealthbrite, and we're, I guess, on a mission to build a generation of financially savvy lawyers. We do that by closing the financial literacy gap, particularly with legal professionals, I should say. And really, we're there to support people on a personal level, but also in the workplace by enabling career progression and actually also reducing firm level risk when all things are not well when it comes to our personal finances. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
It's amazing. Is it something that when you mention it to people, it suddenly dawns on them? God, I hadn't thought about that before. This is a big issue, and it's something we need to talk about. So they have like a bit of a gamma scene kind of moment about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, it's funny, we've been working in the sector now for 3 years.
Mm.
And when I first started, started telling people about what we did and why we existed, I remember lots of people really did have that kind of moment of like, oh, yeah, of course. Personal finances, it's personal, yes, but absolutely it shows up in the workplace, right? And I'm sure she won't mind me saying, because I have this brilliant video clip. We do sort of an annual survey where we ask lawyers across the country to tell us about how they're feeling and dealing with their money. And when we did the launch of the first survey results, we did it in collaboration with the wonderful team at Law Care. We hosted an event to kind of tell people about who we were and what we were up to. And I have this brilliant clip of Elizabeth Rimmer on video saying, CEO of Law Care, saying, when Carla came to talk to me about money and mental health, here I was as the leader of a mental health charity in the legal profession, but actually it was the first time we'd really got into the detail of talking about it. And yet, money is still the number one cause of stress and anxiety in working adults in the UK. But we still don't talk about it enough. It's changing, but there's still work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, you know that I've long been an admirer of your work. I think as soon as you introduced the idea to me,
Yeah,
did we do a newsletter back in the day? I
we
think we
did.
did,
We
didn't
did.
we, when
We
you
did
were
all about money and mental
relatively
health.
new?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to explore that a bit more. Tell me about the former life. You were a Big Four as well back in the day, is that right?
Yeah, and before that, a corporate solicitor. So I started off my life in the legal profession.
Right.
I actually didn't stay in law as a practicing solicitor for very long because I moved out to the United States. And at the time, so I qualified with PwC. Well, it was PwC legal at the time. This was pre the Alternative Business Services legislation coming in. So PwC at that point had a law firm which was separate to its main accountancy firm. Of course, they're all now under one house. But when I moved to the US, I couldn't practice as a lawyer. And I don't to be honest with you, Simon, if I look back at the brash 20-something-year-old that I was then, would I do what she did then now? I'm not sure, but I kind of rocked up in the US and thought it'll be fine. I'll figure it out. Something will come up. Interviewed for a bunch of law firms that were out there who all said, "Oh yes, we'd love to work with you, but you'll have to go back to law school and do the bar exam and all the rest of it." And actually, I would have had to do an LLM because I had a dual qualification from France and England in the UK, so I wasn't automatically recognised in the US. And so I decided, no, that's not for me. I've had enough of exams. I'm not sure I want to do that anymore. And then I sort of thought, well, I mean, tax, it's basically law, isn't it? PwC does that. How hard can it be?
I think in Greece it is, isn't it? Doesn't all the tax? I think all the tax work gets done by lawyers in Greece, and it just makes you realise it is one of those subject matters that you can move
Absolutely.
between the two quite easily.
Yeah,
Do you think that? Do you think that time, that period, that sense of all the hard work you put in, you become a solicitor, you've gone over to the States, you were hoping for a career. Do you think there's some like founding truth in there about how you came to, create Wealthbrite from that? Is that your own experience?
I
And
think
they're
so.
worried. You must have been worried about finances at that point in time. I hope you don't mind me asking, but
No, I
you
don't
know,
mind you asking. I think, look, without a doubt, there are elements of my personality that are much more prone towards risk taking than perhaps others. The fact that I left my job in the UK, hopped over to the US without having a job lined up, but banking on myself that I could do it. I mean, if you go back a little bit in my career history, I didn't get a training contract straight out of university. Despite being told, yeah, I went to Russell Group Uni, I went to King's, I was told, I remember sitting in a lecture hall and a lecturer saying, oh, you won't go looking for jobs, jobs will come looking for you. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, well, I've made it. Didn't get one. Um, so I ended up back in Belfast working as a secretary and then a paralegal. But then I decided to self fund the LPC. And this is 2008. And I took out a personal loan to fund my LPC and living costs back in
that was a
London.
rough old period in which to be doing that as well. I remember. I mean, I was, dealing with the aftermath, the comms in the aftermath of the banking
Yep.
crisis, right?
And 10% interest on a personal loan. My parents were like, are you sure? Are you sure this is a smart thing to do? And I think, again, something in my personality that said, this is one, number one, an investment in myself, but number two, I'm going to back myself that I can make this happen. And whether that's stubbornness or hard work or a combination of the two, I think that trait has allowed me to explore lots of different roles throughout my corporate professional life and done lots of interesting and dynamic things, but also gave me the confidence, I guess, to strike out by myself. So, at the time I left, I was working as a director at EY. I was on one of their global partner pathways. Um, in theory, I'd kind of gotten where I wanted to be, right? Getting to partner. But actually, you know, there were lots of things that I was seeing and kind of experiencing and feeling that made me think maybe this isn't actually what I want. And of course, whilst it feels like when you're at the beginning of your career, getting to partner feels like the ultimate goal. The closer you get to it, the more you realize like it's just the beginning of another very long ladder. And I kind of was looking at it thinking, if I was to get there, it's the beginning of, that's 15, 20 years of your life committed. And you have to be really committed if you're going to become a partner. Um, and I just realized like maybe that wasn't quite where I was meant to be. And so again, some people would say, you know, perhaps quite boldly, I decided to leave, and I didn't have anything else lined up at the time. I did end up working as a head of tax for an AI tech company for a while, whilst I built Wealthbrite at the beginning. But I think yes, those early experiences in my career, my decisions along the way, have given me, I guess, something of the confidence and belief in myself that meant becoming a founder. Yeah, don't get me wrong, it's hard, um, but I've kind of got that drive within me to do it.
I think those entrepreneurial spirits. I mean, you're definitely one of them. We've come across a few, and
Yeah.
we hang around the same circles, you and I, quite often as well. I don't think they always feel as though they entirely fit into those larger firms. Do you know what I mean? There's always something missing, like you said. If you're on partnership track, but you're entrepreneurial, you're quite often going against the grain, in some way or other as well. It doesn't feel
Mm,
like you're a perfect fit. I think that's hard. I definitely felt like that at one of the firms I was at, where it was like, if you put me in an entrepreneurial environment, I'd have been fine, but I struggled. And I think that well-being
mm,
goes closely hand in hand with that mismatch
mm,
between their culture, your values, and And then you add in the kind of financial element that you've got talking about there as well. I think it's really interesting as to that experience. So what was the prompt then to set up Wealthbrite? How did that come about from where you were?
Yeah, well, actually, that kind of the genesis of like what Wealthbrite is kind of tracks back to some of my time at PwC.
Right.
When I was there, as is often the way in large professional environments, you have your day job, your client-facing role, oftentimes, and then you have something of a side of desk job. And one of my side of desk jobs, as it were, was I was quite involved in the firm's programs, wouldn't have been called social mobility at the time, but effectively some of their social mobility programs. And I got involved in a lot of charity work and was there for the some of the formation of the social mobility business partnership that exists now in the city. And as part of that work, I supported the firm with some outreach amongst young school aged kids, sort of 15, 16, 17, who would
Yeah.
come to PwC and be invited to kind of see inside the firm. And this was really a concerted effort by the firm at the time to sort of say, like, you two belong here. You know, you might not have ever thought about coming to work for a big four, but actually, there's plenty of people in our ranks who are like you. And I guess I fit the bill there partly because I've got the Northern Irish accent, and also because I love being in front of those people to tell them, like, look, I speak like you, dress in clothes that are not a suit. Look at me, I'm not wearing a suit. All those things that kind of add up to busting some of the myths of what it means to work in those large professional organizations. And anyway, we were looking at programs of learning to support people when they would cycle through these insight days and ultimately joining the firm. And financial education was part of that package. And so I got involved in creating and delivering some of the financial education programs we did. And then that kind of sparked an interest in me. And then what we were able to do was we took our program that I built, and that program I built is now part of the standardized PwC Insight Day. So particularly for those who go and learn about tax, they play a game which I came up with, which is to match the item to the VAT rate because the VAT rules are so bizarre. You get to learn whether or not your crisps go in one packet versus your, veg crisps in another. And then we took some of that program to HMRC. And basically, what happened was this like ripple effect where all of a sudden people were talking amongst in the firm. And I was kind of involved in those conversations about how few people really understood the tax system,
Yeah.
broader
Compound interest.
economics, yep, and also just managing the money. And whilst I'd started on this mission looking at young people entering the profession,
Yeah.
I was talking to peers of mine and senior leaders, and they would privately admit, yeah, we're paid to be the expert in the room, but very rarely do we hold up the mirror to our own lives, right? And people who would subsequently, I mean, since I founded Wealthbrite, the number of people, and I've had former colleagues and people I haven't been in touch with for years pick up the phone to me and just share stuff, and it's striking to me because obviously they've seen what we're doing with Wealthbrite in breaking the money taboo, and they've been attracted to that, and it's sort of been an outlet for them and saying, oh, finally someone's giving me permission to talk about this and say I don't know. um,
Amazing.
so it's
Amazing. It must be such an emotive set of conversations you have with people as well. It's about okay, financial education, sure. It's also the relationship you've got with money, isn't it? It's about, have you got a good relationship? Have you got a bad relationship with money? How do you feel about it? What's the biggest misconception maybe that legal professions have got about money or finances? Well, if you could characterize it, is there one thing that people tend to get wrong most often, or?
it's well, I think the misconception is the assumption that everybody knows this stuff.
Right, right.
We ask people a lot, like, what's stopping lawyers talking more openly about money? And the answers that the people who cycle through our learning programs give are things like fear of judgment. Um, it's assumed everybody knows. still a culture in law of salary secrecy, which makes it much harder for people to feel like it's okay to talk about personal financial issues.
Yeah.
But I think one of the interesting and the big things that, I'm seeing a lot of is the fact that still there persists in some corners of the profession this view that personal finances is just a personal issue. That, as long as you're paying people decent wage, it's kind of up to them to sort themselves out. And the reason I think that's a mistake is, well, because actually financial conduct is part of the professional code. And so there's a direct read across from personal financial challenges and firm level risk. Because, of course, when people's personal finances maybe suffer or struggle or get out of control, what you can see, not always, but what you can see is people starting to behave in ways that are inconsistent with that code of conduct. And that's something we've been talking about recently with law firm general counsel and compliance and regulatory leaders. And I think this is something that actually is happening more frequently than people care to admit. And the question, therefore, is what can we do to prevent it? So, for example, without naming names or disclosing any confidential data, you know, we are aware of issues like falsified expenses, which have been made, which, when uncovered, go back to somebody's personal financial circumstances, which have meant that they've been essentially living on the firm's expenses. Timesheets that have been falsified because people are desperate for the bonus, and of course, the billable hour is mapped to the bonus. And it can escalate beyond that, right? Of course, it's much harder these days to steal client funds and, take the money of the firm. But there are other professional conduct issues that can arise when people are vulnerable, I would say.
Yeah, it almost feels like an overwhelming topic. I don't know. I
Mm.
wondered, is it that's the hardest challenge about having set up Wealthbrite? Just literally the scale of the challenge that you're trying to take on, or is it something else that you struggled with, or that is your biggest challenge? Yeah, that's what that's it.
Look, I think, the challenge is getting to the right people to make sure that they can see how the dots connect, right?
Hmm.
When we started Wealthbrite, I think it's fair to say that one of our first challenges was educating the market that this was even a problem that they should pay attention to.
An awareness issue. Yeah,
Yeah. We've moved way beyond that now, and I
good.
think it's
I
fair to
see
say
that.
that, like, people know that finances is a topic that people are talking about more. They get the money and mental health link. They're aware of the connection across different elements of the firm. I think now the challenge is, okay, so how do we speak to the people that, because there's lots of people who I would say champion what we do, particularly those working with socially mobile talent in law. They get it, right? First generation professional, first time working in a high income environment. They appreciate that for them, and it might be that they're aged 18, straight out of school, first regular paycheck. They get it that for those people, like, navigating financial adulthood is like complex, and there is maybe a role for a firm to play in helping them. I think where we are now exploring kind of like how we go beyond that is where I make the connection back to firm level risk. And this is an area that's still pretty new, I think, to the sector, to kind of realize that, as I said, it's not just a personal issue. It goes to wider
So
professional conduct.
when you started out, then it was about lawyers, individuals, people coming into the market, maybe graduate recruitment, or people
Yeah.
who are dealing with the kind of early talent. But it feels as if that's your focus has shifted a bit towards what compliance, GCs, managing
Yeah,
partners,
and I think
founders.
absolutely, because I think, we've built up the narrative, the awareness, the kind of recognition of what we do as needed and kind of present for the individual lawyer. But I think it's then saying, okay, well, great. That's great that people see this and they kind of rightly acknowledge that this is part of a person's holistic kind of needs. Um, but actually, how do we start to affect sector wide change? And that sector wide change around this issue really comes from activating leadership, right? And how are we going to activate leadership? And how do we activate and motivate people to go beyond lip service and sort of light touch well-being initiatives? Well, we need to speak to risk, cost, and revenue in an organization, right? Because that's what leaders care about. And I think personally that there's a really strong case to be made, and it's in black and white in the professional code, that question, can you satisfactorily manage your personal finances? That line item sits directly in black and white in the professional code of conduct, and yet a lot of lawyers don't even know that. So what we want to do is say, yes, this is the tiny slice of the compliance landscape, tiny slice, and I know that. But what we want to do is say, help firms understand why actually this is maybe higher risk than they may realize, but actually lower effort to solve for and mitigate. Because actually, all it needs really is for you to kind of assess the risk and then do something about it. And that doing something about it comes back to learning and education.
And lawyers are really good at that, right? I mean, they're good at lifetime learning. They're good at,
Yeah.
maybe resisting things at a certain level of being skeptical of whether or not some training like that's going to work. But as soon as they do go through it, then they advocate for it as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We're
Absolutely.
very lucky to have that kind of flip as a profession. I don't think there's any in between. People
No.
don't, people don't feel like, oh, well, it's really, they commit to it, as it were.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking, and maybe you can't answer, but which kind of generations, if we think through the generations of it, and I don't think you can characterize people into groups quite as simply as that, but are there maybe broad brush
Hmm.
observations that can be made about which ones are struggling most with this, or is that not possible?
No, we do map. So I think, we one of the things we map is levels of financial anxiety and stress. And what our data has consistently shown over the last number of years is that there's sort of it's a bell curve. Is that bell curve? No, it's a U curve, the other way around, a U curve. So peak stress is felt at the start of people's careers.
Mm.
So it's actually just in that moment before and immediately after qualification. And we can talk about why in a minute. And then it kind of dips as you move through sort of associate grade, like that manager role. And then what we see is it starts to rise again at 10 years plus PQE. Okay. Now, we don't we don't have perfect causation data, but we do have correlation data. So what we know is that those kind of career stages map, generally speaking, to major life events that happen, right? So the pre-qualification is just the kind of like, you know, generalized overwhelm at being new in role, figuring life out. You might be living by yourself for the first time, dealing with bills. And, sadly, the vast majority of people in the UK, they're not taught this stuff, right? So you're kind of having to figure it out all at the same time, on top of trying to be the best person at work as possible. So our whole thing is, how do you reduce the noise for those types of people? How do you take out the money stress so that they can focus on like the work stress and dealing with that as appropriately as possible?
Right.
Post qualification, that's an interesting one because most people think, oh yeah, but on qualification it's a massive money moment, right? You sometimes double your salary overnight. And actually, what we have found is that again has the impact of triggering anxiety in a lot of the younger generation, particularly those that come from socially mobile backgrounds, because they
Okay.
tell us, I know I should be doing something with this, but I actually have no idea where to start. And so again, they want to be good stewards of this financial opportunity that they've been given. I have a friend of mine, is a friend of a friend. He's not long qualified at a Magic Circle law firm, and we were having this exact conversation. And he was saying to me, I know I need to be doing the right thing now because who knows where I might be in 5 years' time. but I just don't know where to start. I can't ask family because they don't know. They've never had this type of financial experience. But I don't feel like I can really ask any of the like seniors in work because I don't know that this is like an appropriate thing for me to talk about with them. And then the interesting dynamic for them is he would say one of his most, used resources is social media. They're going to TikTok and YouTube and Reddit for financial education. But as this guy said to me, I know it's not right because I know it's not reliable, but I don't know where else to go.
There's been two big major
Yeah.
news stories in the last week as well about exactly that subject. I think one is that one in two of the top 100 performing wellbeing videos on
Yeah.
social media have got inaccuracies.
Yep.
That was reported in the Guardian yesterday. And two is, I think that the majority of those finfluencers, as they're called, are outside of FCA any form of regulation and outside of the ASA's regulation as well. So they're not actually saying this is advice and they're not saying this is an advert. And so we've got this issue where I often think, Carla, it's a bit like, uh, with all due respect to my eldest daughter, giving relationship advice to each other when we're all like 17 years old. And it's like, okay, this can't be the best idea necessarily, right? We need to have somebody who knows a bit more about it than
I
this.
know. Look, it's actually worse than what you just described, though, Simon. Because I mean, one of the things we're actually going to do in the next couple of months is we're going to launch. So we're launching this intergenerational community feature called Keep the
Mm.
Change. So we've got people behind real people, not AI, real people behind the scenes, a partner, a senior associate, and someone at the start of their career who are going to answer anonymously questions from the community about common financial questions. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to also do fact check on financial content that's out there in social media and other places. I myself, I have one that's a real bugbear of mine at the minute, which is it appeared on a podcast, a YouTube version of the podcast for a very famous podcaster who has 100 million YouTube followers. You can probably guess who it is. Very well known guy, and he likes to platform lots of different variety of people with very differing views. And there was a recent one where he platformed a guy who talked about crypto and about cryptocurrency. And of course, he did that nice thing where he chopped up the long conversation and had these little miniature clips. And one of the miniature clips that went viral was this guy, this crypto guy, saying, you shouldn't bother investing in index funds. S&P 500, FTSE 100, not worth it. That's wrong. You should be investing in crypto. And what really got my backup was at no stage was there a health warning on that video that said, this is not financial advice. There were no commentary provided by the person's podcast company that said, actually, the data shows that investing in the long term in index funds is one of the best ways to kind of build accumulative wealth because
Genius.
you outbeat the inflation stats. You want to look at some of the most successful investors in the world. Warren Buffett, what did he do? He invested heavily in index funds. And this kind of content that is like clickable, snackable, clickbait content is just allowed to run riot on social media. And so that's a real challenge when you're dealing with Gen Z, particularly because they are hungry for financial information. They actually don't really suffer from the same social taboos as maybe older generations in the workplace when it comes to
Okay.
money. But I think what they are struggling with is an overwhelm of misinformation and lack of trusted resources, and that's really where we step in. That's what we want to be
And
for them.
I'm not sure it occurs to that age group necessarily. I do spend a lot of time with people in that age range as well. I
Yeah.
don't think it, I don't think it occurs to people as misinformation.
Oh
I
no.
I don't think it occurs to them that way, but I think it looks like that when you're able, with your experience and your vast knowledge in that area, to look at it and say, well, that's plainly wrong, or has actually got some other duties or obligations in relation to it that haven't been discharged. But I think if you're in that world, that's just your normal.
I agree. I'll give you another story. We did a training session at a large firm recently about getting on the property ladder for some of their junior lawyers. And at the end of the session, one of their lawyers came up to me and we talked about affordability on mortgage checks. And we talked about what was typical and what you would be required and things to think about because obviously different lenders have different kind of checks and rules. And they came up to me at the end and they said, you know, I though it was interesting what you're saying about affordability, but I watched a TikTok the other day, and yeah, this I read that you could to get around affordability checks, you can just do a buy to let mortgage and then move in. And I was like, I said to that person, I said, well, you know, ignoring everything else, did you recognize that that would be fraud and invalidate any insurance? Oh, really? And that's exactly what you just said. They don't even connect the dots or realize that this is
Mm.
bad information, misinformation, potentially even, you know, as I said, fraudulent in some examples. And that's worrying, right? Because um, we need to try and find a way of building people's knowledge up so that they can have a much more critical eye when it comes to that kind of content.
Really seeing it's really interesting to look at that education piece from my youngest one as well, because she's currently having to do Latin. And if I could swap it out for financial education, she may be 12, but I just have a sense that there's some of those things. It's not. I think it gets treated. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. But it gets treated as like the icing on the cake. It might be something you're taught when your exams are done when you're 16, or when your exams are done when you're 18, or when you're at university, or somebody does it during well-being week somewhere. So there's nothing wrong with those kind of educative pieces. I think we need it, but it feels like something that should be a lifelong
Yeah,
learning program. It should be in there alongside maths and English and science and French.
I think, I mean, you're probably not surprised to hear that I agree with you. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for starting that education much earlier. I think the problem is that we still have a system or I guess a societal culture that maybe assumes the family environment is the place where this is being kind of built up. But actually, that's not really that's not really true for the vast majority of people.
So you saw this amazing. Do you remember the NatWest kind of taboo conversations they had in their adverts a few years ago, where they had those money conversations? Is it 2 or 3 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago? I don't know. And I think it really smashed through and made people realize it is okay to talk about those things as well. So,
Mm.
if our assumption is it's happening at family level, I don't think it is,
No.
in my experience anyway. And then I think, enabling that to happen is a good place for it to happen. But workplace training, your kind of training as well, has always struck me as a really good, how can I put it? Almost like there's no judgment in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's judgment free. It's like these are the things that you need to know. What I also heard from what you said today was you need to do this to be a better lawyer. I heard that from William Peake a few weeks ago on LinkedIn. He was just
Mhm.
saying, look, if you know how to evaluate the financials of the business, then you'll be a better lawyer. And I think this is true around your financial education as well, isn't it? If you understand how this stuff works, then you'll be a better lawyer, full stop, as well.
Absolutely. One of the biggest like unlocks I think for people when it comes to facing or reckoning with their personal finances is the ability to have challenging or more direct conversations about money. And I know from my own experience that that then enables you to have a much higher quality conversation with a client about money. I can't tell you the number of people I've met who would would rather bury their head in the sand, write off WIP and take the heat from partners on a sort of low margin code on a project than pick up the phone with their client and have a difficult conversation about money. Why? Well, it's because they've got this real like emotional block when it comes to dealing with money conversations. And
Yeah.
actually, you know, that has got very little to do with their commercial acumen. Like, do they understand the numbers and can they read what's on the WIP or the P&L or whatever it is, right? It's much more to do with their emotional connection with money, the way that their narratives and their beliefs with money. And, you know, that's why in all of our training programs, one of the first things we tackle is understanding the psychology of money, because it's only when you kind of start to unpack some of that, like what I describe as our personal financial baggage, that you can start to recognize the influences that have borne weight on your financial behaviors, both in your personal life, but then also how they show up in the workplace as well, you know? Um, and
Amazing.
I agree with William, like, you know, absolutely, if you can get smart at trying to understand and get more comfortable with this topic of financial acumen, financial IQ, you will be able to feel more confident navigating career progression, whether that's salary negotiations, understanding your pension and maximizing that appropriately. And then, as I said, all the sort of knock on consequences around your client conversations. So, yeah, and also just also how you're engendering then a team culture where you can start to pass on some of this learning as well.
Yeah, I mean, one small note before we move on to just some quick fire questions for the
Yeah.
last bit here. I think it sounds like a weird thing to say, but I think finances, poor finances cause loss of sleep. Loss of sleep causes poor advice causes loads of other issues, regulatory issues and things as well. So I think it's one of those things that if we get it right, and we know happy people when we see it and get it right,
Mm.
um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it makes a huge difference to your performance in the workplace as well. Some very quick fire questions for you then to finish off because you take up so much of your time. If Wealthbrite had a theme tune or theme song, what would it be?
Oh, well, we actually have a whole playlist, Simon.
Of course you do.
And let me pick out some of my favorites from that. I don't know if I'd like, maybe I Need a Dollar.
It's
Black,
okay.
a great tune. We've got Sam Smith's Money on My Mind, which is a good one as well. Or Destiny's Child, Bills, Bills, Bills. Those are some of my top fave songs from that playlist, which I
I
think is
like it.
great.
We need to get out so that we can add it to the.
Oh yeah, I'll share the playlist for sure.
I'll
Yeah,
definitely do that. That should be fun to get that going as
yeah.
well. What can lawyers learn from 15-year-olds about financial literacy? What can we? Because you've got this campaign coming up to get that intergenerational conversation happening. What can we learn the other way?
Talk about it more openly. 15 year
Yeah.
olds are not afraid to talk about it. They they don't have any shame. They don't care if they don't know. They're not afraid to sort of ask a mate how much something cost or, what they're spending their money on. So I think, there's something about that. Like, I think some of our societal taboos are learned adult behaviors. If we could wind back to be a little bit more childlike in our approach, I would use childlike in the sense of having a growth mindset, an open mindset. I think that's the biggest thing we can learn.
Well, and also bringing that play mentality that you spoke about earlier on with the gamification of some of the learning as
Yeah,
well. I really love that idea. I think
absolutely.
that playfulness is a great way of overcoming this, not triggering shame. Right, we can
Mm.
get through things well. Last one. If financial literacy were a cocktail, what would the main ingredients be, and what would it be called?
Oh. Well, do you want to know a funny story? When I saw your quickfire rounds, I was like, well, we did a launch night for our online learning platform a couple of years ago, and I did have money themed cocktails at that event.
Of course,
Sinking fund spritz, prosecco, and aperitivo, bright, sparkling, and quietly preparing for life's curveballs.
I love it. I love it. You know that they're going to be drinking it across the nation. And listen, we've been long supporters of what you've done. I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
that we haven't got to meet up face to face recently, but I'm sure we will do at some point.
I'm sure we will. I'm a big fan of
You'll
what
probably be on the stage. I'll be in the crowd applauding as per usual and stuff as well. But I think what you're doing is transforming, like I say, lots of things, not just their attitudes to money, our attitudes to money, but also how well people sleep and how well they perform at work as well as a result of it. So thank you for everything that you're doing. If you're watching today's episode and you really liked it, and why wouldn't you? Carla's brilliant. Please do give her a follow on LinkedIn. I found that she's great and generous and mindful and really good to kind of hang around with. But equally, if you like this episode, and I think it's going to really resonate with some people, please can you do a really responsible thing and send it to a friend that you think might value opening the door to that conversation as well. Maybe say, oh, should we watch this together or whatever? I don't know, whatever it takes, right? Please could you consider doing that? Not because I want to get the view count up, but because I think it will help transform people's lives as well. So, Carla, as always, thank you for being such a superstar.
Yeah. Thank you for having this conversation and making space for it. I really appreciate it.
Will you do another episode of the newsletter for us at some point and go again and tell us what you've learned over the last 3 years? Are you happy to do
I
that?
would love to do that. I would love to do that. 3 years of learning. Where,
Oh,
how far have we
goodness.
gotten to, and what's still to come?
1,000 days later, here we go. I love that. That's brilliant, right? We can do that as well. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll catch up soon. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.